So today is another special day. We get to finally talk about the Nintendo DSi XL and see pretty much how this device holds up in 2022. Now it's been many years since this thing actually originated, and to be kind of honest, when this device first came out in 2009, I honestly wasn't too sure what the demographic was, to be honest. Now it came out in 2009 in a bunch of places, but it also came out in 2010 for a lot of places as well. But what I will tell you is, with something like the Nintendo DSi XL, when I first saw it, I just didn't understand who was going to buy it. Like, I understand people wanted bigger consoles, but I was a pretty young kid at this time. And to be honest, since this, console's origination and how it holds up now, I'm actually very happy about the way this console's been pretty much growing. And I think the XL lineup, including the DSi XL, the 3DS XL, the 2DS XL, has been some of my favorite consoles of all time. Now, there are some weird things about this console, and there are some reasons why I love the Nintendo DSi more than the DSi XL, but this whole entire console genre of the DSi and the DSi XL were super crazy to me. These things you would not believe, and I don't understand. These are so underrated. These consoles pretty much made, the Nintendo DS look like a super old, outdated console. These things actually had a proper software, version on them. With the DS Lite, we had our home menu, but there really wasn't too much else you could do. If you didn't buy any games, the only things you could do are like PictoChat, DS Remote Play, which I would do all the time, and that was kind of it. There really wasn't much else going for those consoles. With the DSi and the DSi XL, on the other hand, it was a full-on operating system. Even if you didn't buy any games, you could utilize the cameras. You can download games online via, the DSi shop or whatever it was called. So that was another really cool thing that we had. So going from a DS Lite to a DSi, that was a ginormous upgrade. That was probably the DSi and DSi XL are probably some of the most important consoles that Nintendo has ever made, and there are still some remnants of the DSi XL even on the Nintendo Switch. When I go through the home menu and I look through everything, dude, there is so much similarity. I'm like so surprised how similar and how basically up to date the DSi XL still feels. Now, on the outside, you did actually have a little bit of a different design compared to the Nintendo DSi. So you had a little bit of like a glass top, but it wasn't like a metallic. It felt really good. I really liked the premium feeling of the DSi XL. You had that single camera setup on the bottom right corner, which was really cool. You had, the ports, the charging port, the stylus, everything on the outside, headphone jack as well. But just like the DSi, you did not have a Game Boy Advance slot. Personally, for me, it wasn't a crazy big deal. I still have my DS Lite, but I did have a few Game Boy Advance games that would have been nice to have this thing on. But I actually didn't even own this console when it first came out. I first bought this console, I think back in 2016 or 2017. And funny enough, one of the first, viral videos I had, it wasn't even viral, but it was like maybe 3,000 views at that time, which was a lot for me, was from the DSi XL. It was like my most watched video on my channel at that time, which was so funny because now I'm still talking about this console, which is still so beautiful. Now, flipping this console open, this is where things become a little bit different. So this is a much bigger console than the Nintendo DSi. We have a 4.2-inch display on the top and the bottom, same size displays. When they switched over to the 3DS, they changed it up. I actually prefer the panels being the same size, to be completely honest, and I think with the 2DS XL, that was like the perfect design. I love that design a lot. The DSi XL, though, still looks really good. It was a thick console. It was a really big console too. XL did not mean XL really, kind of meant a lot in this specific lineup. But with those displays, I'll get into the display quality in a second, but you had the speakers, you had obviously the D-pad, the buttons on the right side, you had the power button and everything. And funny enough, even when I hold this console in this day and age, it still feels very good. It does not feel like a cheap console. And this reminds me a lot of my Nintendo DS Lite, which still feels extremely premium. This lineup of the Nintendo DSi, and it's stemming from the Nintendo DS, Lite, I think these consoles looked great, and I love these, portable consoles for sure. Now, one thing, not everything is perfect, as I always mention. This console's displays in this day and age do not really hold up that well, to be completely honest. I don't know why Nintendo decided to go over this route, but it seems like they literally just took the same resolution. I think they did take the same resolution of the DSi's display, and they just expanded it. So this was not a higher resolution display. When I look at my Nintendo DSi display, that display looks pretty good. It's not like a bad panel, but with the DSi XL, this is actually a pretty pixelated display. And like I mentioned, they pretty much made the displays larger. They didn't mess around with the resolution, it doesn't seem like. And, you can definitely tell that the games are a lot more pixelated than they should be. It's not a big deal. I don't think if you're going to go ahead and, play games on this thing, I don't think a lot of people are going to care about it too much, but it was one thing that kind of threw me off at that time. and I wasn't really like a super crazy big fan of that, but there's still a humongous library of games that you can play on this console, and that is probably one of my favorite things about it. The gaming library of this console is absolutely crazy. Unfortunately, there's no Game Boy Advance games you can play on this thing, but there are still a lot of DS, Lite and DSi games that came out for this console. I mean, you have, the Animal Crossing, you have New Super Mario Bros., you have Super Mario 64 DS, you have, all those Brain Ages, you have a ton of different games, and those are just the first ones off the top of my head. You also had a few Zeldas that came out for this console too, so there was a lot of capability between this console just from the gaming library, but you also had the capability of going on that DSi shop for DSiWare, even though that's shut down right now, but you actually had the capability there of also kind of downloading some stuff, and I knew of a lot of people that went through and actually downloaded a bunch of games via that software. So personally, I think that was a really cool thing. I do think right now it's a little bit of a different, people are kind of used to the DS Lite games and everything, but this was something that was really cool, and because this console also had an SD card slot, you could actually go ahead and pretty much just, load some games on there if you downloaded them on DSiWare, and you could also, store photos there too and everything. So for a basic, console, this thing was more than a console. This thing was, a multimedia device, which at that time back in 2009, I'm sure, was actually really cool. And the DSi came out before this and had pretty much the same exact capability. Now, another big thing about the Nintendo DSi XL was the battery life. Apparently they said it lasts, 1 to 3 hours longer than the Nintendo DSi, which is probably an understatement. I had amazing battery life on my Nintendo DSi XL. Now typically I was playing indoors, so I didn't really go outside in humongous crazy brightness, so the brightness was always pretty low, and I really only played like 3 games. I played Super Mario 64 DS, New Super Mario Bros., and Animal Crossing, and I would just keep replaying those games over and over again. But in my experience, this specific console handled everything I threw at it perfectly fine, and I loved the battery life of this console. This was giving me way better battery life than my 3DS XL, which didn't really, surprise me that much. I was expecting the 3DS XL to not perform that well in terms of battery life. It did better, but the DSi XL did way better in my opinion. So at this point, to be completely honest, I think the Nintendo DSi XL is pretty much worth it if you're trying to keep it as like a collector's item. If you're able to get one in like a really good condition, then I would say go for it. But in this day and age, I think a lot more people probably want to side for a 3DS or 3DS XL. Although the 3DS XL, the 3DS lineup sold pretty well, I think the DSi XL is a really good console. But if you have to go purchase one, I would probably just recommend getting the 3DS XL. It has all the features that the DSi XL has, but you can also go and play a bunch of those, Nintendo 3DS XL games as well. There were a lot of graphical improvements, I would say, from a DSi XL to the 3DS, and going for that 3DS or 3DS XL is probably going to give you a better library of games, and it's going to allow you to like tap into that market of like those games that came out. I think the DSi XL is awesome still though. Like if you want to buy it, I would say go for it. These things are not really that expensive. They may have actually gone up in value a little bit. I know the Switches have been going up in value, the Wii U's have been going up in value. I don't think the 3DS's have been going up, but I could be totally wrong because Nintendo sold a lot of them. But I would recommend either going for like the 3DS XL or even the 2DS XL. Going for one of those consoles is probably the ones I would recommend doing. But this console, about I guess 12 or 13 years later, is still performing very well, and the impact of this console is still showing in this day and age, if I'm being honest. So that kind of covers it up there. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.